Welcome to Conscious Curiosity SD, the podcast that provides the backstory of local successful San Diego leaders who bring hope, inspiration, and purpose to the work they do and the people they lead. Conscious Curiosity is sponsored by Conscious Capitalism San Diego and the Better Business Bureau of San Diego. And I'm your host, Jeff Blanton from Jailbreak Leadership. We'll hear from leaders who prove businesses can positively change the communities we work and live in by seeking a higher purpose beyond profit. We'll explore why they have come to lead in this way, the rewards and challenges of being a conscious leader, and their vision for the future of their businesses and the community of San Diego. Today, we have a woman leader on Conscious Curiosity SD that has made a significant difference in the world in multiple ways, from helping to save the planet to mentoring the next generation of young women leaders. We are blessed to have Kimberlee Centera on the show today. Kimberlee, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Super excited to be here.
Kimberlee is the president and CEO of TerraPro Solutions, a major player in the renewable energy arena. TerraPro Solutions provides risk management expertise for the development and financing for large-scale, complex, high-value projects in solar, wind, and energy storage. Next time you're on the road trip out in the desert and see miles and miles of windmills, think of Kimberlee. Those are the types of projects she's working on. As a trailblazer in what you can imagine a highly male-dominated industry, she's been recognized many times over. She was the finalist for the Women in Power Award, San Diego's Business Journal's CEO of the Year, and the National Association of Women Business Owners Green Community Award. Often we talk about leadership, we talk about power, but not too many leaders can talk about power being measured in megawatts. So I know this interview is going to be electric today, Kimberlee. Little humor there, right?
Love it.
Well, anyways, let's get started. Lots of fun. What a great background you have. And I mean, that's where I really like to get started is you got involved with renewables way before that was the thing to talk about. I mean, everybody knows about renewables today, but you've been involved for a really long time. What drew you to that? What was the factor to say, man, I want to get into that space?
Well, at the time, I was working for a small, privately held wind power developer here in San Diego. I was in the legal department, and about every other week, the head of development would come over to my office, and he would say, you know, you've got to come and work with us in development. This is where all the fun is, and this is where we're building things. And you know, I thought it was a little foreign to me. I really had never really built anything, didn't really know a lot about renewables, but eventually I gave in and went over to the dark side, as they say.
Dark side, eh? Where you get your boots dirty?
Yeah. But, you know, it was very interesting to really have a chance to work with people. And one of the things that I loved is all the early visionaries for renewables. And there were so many people out there that had been tracking renewables for a long time and wanted to be involved, wanted to find a way to contribute. And so it was a really wonderful way to be able to partner with people in a lot of different ways, through acquiring their land or working with, you know, title companies. I was just on a call today. We were going through a really difficult project in Iowa, and we were talking about how difficult it is to develop renewables. And you would think that we would be welcomed with open arms as the good guys, and it would be super easy, but it's not.
As long as it's not in my backyard. It's a great idea as long as it's over there somewhere, right?
So, but I just loved, there were so many people just from a grassroots perspective, and I think you still see that in renewables, but I have really a special place in my heart for those people in the early days, you know, 25, 30 years ago, that got excited about wind projects in Texas or Wyoming or Colorado or Washington or wherever it may be.
Well, that is the fun part, right? The early years when people have vision and they're excited, they got passion. It's just not a job. I mean, there's a grander purpose to what they're doing, and they have a vision for where it's got to go. And man, I wish we got a little hotter on that trail back in the day, right? Maybe we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. So you've been in it for a long time, and then along the way, you decided that you were going to kind of spin off and start your own business. What led to that?
Well, it was 2012, and our small wind power company had been sold to a very large independent power producer, worldwide company. And when we were acquired, I sat back and I said, this is it. I'm done. I can just do what I love, work with the people that I love, and develop projects. But renewables has a way of being unpredictable and volatile, and lots of peaks and valleys. And so in 2012, the company decided they were going to exit renewables, that it was just too risky.
Oh, wow.
And so the head of the department at the time had come and actually even talked to me a little bit before, and he said, Kim, the office is going to close, and, we're all going to transition. And he was wonderful because he really wanted to make sure that I had a pathway, forward. So I knew this was a decision point. I was working on a very large financing for a solar project in Imperial, and it really set the bar for me. It was almost $1 billion, wow. So it was this huge transaction.
Serious project.
And that really was the beginning. And honestly, I had never really seen myself as an entrepreneur. I never really saw myself as having my own business. But this opportunity really presented itself, and I decided to take advantage of it. I worked on this closing, and after that happened, then I had a decision point. Did I want to stay with my own business or go and work for someone else? And I was actually in negotiations with a company to go work for them, and we were pretty far along, and I was really doing some hard thinking about where I saw myself and where I really thought my opportunities were. And I really decided at the end of the day to take just, rely on myself and just see where I could take it. One of the things I was talking to them about was building this renewable division. And so I woke up one day and I thought, gosh, I'm going to go for another male-dominated company and build something for them. And what if I do it for myself? What would that look like if I just did it for myself? And I called everyone that I knew in San Diego over a 30-day period. I don't know
You were
how
on
many.
a mission.
I was. I called everyone that I knew to go have coffee, to go have lunch. What do you think of this idea? And here's what I'm kicking around, and got some really great input. And I later on, and I speak to young women now that are building their careers, and that's one of the things I really talk to them about is grow your network, build your network. I didn't do that till later, and I've realized the value of that now. And so I really try to encourage people, build that network, call those people, invite them out for lunch, go for coffee.
So were you hoping for someone to say, don't do it? And everybody kept saying, yeah, sounds like a great idea, Kimberlee.
It sounds like a great idea. And
I'm looking for my out over here.
I was so touched by the people who had, really great careers, so many awesome people. Howard Sussman comes to mind, who spent a lot of time with me, just encouraging me and also giving me some ideas. Because I said, I asked questions. What do you think I should do? If I want to grow this business and create this business, what do you think would be valuable? How can I demonstrate to people that I've all these years of experience? And we talked about this project list that I came up with, and eventually that grew into my marketing regime. But, I talked to about stories and all that, and it really helped me. I think we underestimate sometimes how much we know. For me, doing it every day, I so many years of experience, but it was interesting to go back and look at the course of my career and see, oh my gosh, I look at all these projects, look at all these contributions.
Combination of what we know and who we know too, right? Because all those projects all meant you had relationship there. And so you didn't walk out with a project in hand, because sometimes in those scenarios, like, oh, I got a project to get started with, but you actually walked out like, okay, this is a cold start.
Cold start, startup mentality, talking to everybody. And eventually those coffee meetings and lunch meetings led to referrals to clients and led to introductions. And I do think, having worked hard all those years and having a good work ethic paid off, because people knew that I could bring value and knew that I was a hard worker. So one thing led to another, and it just started to grow into a business. It's
still a very scary move, though, because you know what you know about doing that work, but now I got to go find the work and accounting and all the other things that come with running a business.
Oh, my gosh.
I know when I started my consulting business, like, oh, I know how to do projects. That's my thing. I get to do more projects. Now you're a marketing guy. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
interesting. So in the world of conscious capitalism, we talk about higher purpose, that your business has a purpose grander than just the product or service and making a profit. And usually when someone's willing to step out and do something, there's a grander motivation, which I think is often the higher purpose of, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So what was behind that? You're making some moves, but was there something that you were trying to make your business be or accomplish with the business that you felt you could do on your own that you could never do inside another company? Or what would you describe as maybe your higher purpose?
I think I really wanted to create something with a certain culture. I really wanted to, obviously working with other people, especially in small business, you see things that you say, I'll never do that. And then other things where you say, oh, I want to do that.
Unfortunately, it's usually 80-20. I'll never do that one.
Exactly. But I realized that I really wanted to create an environment where people felt valued, where one of the greatest things I feel like, and I hope this is one of the legacies that I leave, is so many of the people that work for me had no background in renewables. They started out and they've learned it from the ground up. And we have an environment where we manage from strength. And so if someone says, Kim, I really want to try this, let's try it. You want to start negotiating leases? Let's do it. Let's give you that opportunity. And I have people that started out in admin positions and are now doing, marketing communications or working on projects. And in a lot of cases, it's been really exciting to see people grow and change and do things. I had people initially, women who said, don't put me on a call. I don't want to have to be on the call reporting to the client. I just want to work behind the scenes. And now they're comfortable, working and being out in the forefront. So I love that. I love that I can take a chance on people and that somebody else can't tell me, no, you can't do that. You can't take a chance on that person. Or, if you have a vision and an idea for something, you can't do that. So it was a big motivator for me to be able to create in a really innovative environment where, there was no limitations. There wasn't anyone telling me you can't do this.
I love that. The idea, I think one thing you just described and what kind of popped in my head was how self-limiting all of us tend to be. I mean, the ones that aren't, you don't have to worry about them, right? They're already charging down the hill doing their thing. But a large section of the population really just kind of thinks that, I can't do this or these are the rules, especially in kind of in a corporate environment where sometimes the bosses are like, come on, step up, but, the people aren't. But there's nothing more satisfying than what you're describing when someone's hesitating. It's kind of like watching a little kid jump in the pool for the first time. Like all this, come on, you can do it. And then after that first one, hey, we're ready to roll. You talked about strengths. Like maybe delve into that a little bit. I mean, how do you flush that out? Is that part of the hiring process? Is this something you do once you get people in house, or how do you really figure out where people's real superpowers are at?
I think certainly starting them. We have a mentor program. We like to mentor people. We have a certain way that we like to service our clients and the way that we like to work. And so I think helping just build people, just empowering people, having a positive environment. We try to allow for questions, and you can always reach out to me. I try to have regular one-on-ones with everyone to find out what they're doing and what they're thinking. It's interesting because I spend a lot of time talking to people, especially listening to women about some of the barriers and limiting beliefs. And a lot of it is leadership. We don't do enough to encourage people. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us as leaders to create an environment where it's okay to make mistakes. You're going to learn, and we're all in this together. It's a team sport. And so let's work on this together. So we've worked really hard to create that kind of environment where people feel safe. It's okay to fail. You're going to fail sometimes. We obviously really learn from our failures more than our successes. So I think that's really what I've worked really hard to create is a drama-free, let's encourage, one another and really work together. And I think one of the things that I've learned too is it's constant. It's not something that you can just say, okay, we've done that, we can check that box and we can move on. It's ongoing. You have to really have those conversations all the time. And
it's kind of funny when somebody would think it's one and done. It's not. It's the job. It's the job. It's actually the job.
And I think it's a demanding job because you have those conversations, and sometimes you have to really ask questions. And during COVID, one of the things that we did when we had to pivot, because I like to have people be on video, but one of the things that we started doing, and it seems like a simple, intuitive action, was we started calling people. We started calling each other, and we started calling our clients. Just calling and just say, hey, checking in. How are you doing? What's going on? So I think those kinds of real life, authentic things, people appreciate that, even if you're not perfect. I mean, we freely admit we're not perfect. We're trying to fix things. So I think it makes a difference.
Kind of curious, as you're building this culture and then the folks you were hiring, one of the guests I had in here, Delinda Forsythe, she had a business and a woman in a highly male-dominant environment. And so when she started hiring, she was hiring a lot of young folks because, cheaper, and a lot of women. And that became kind of the complexion of her organization. And she's now all about generational leadership and transitions and all these kinds of good things. Do you have a certain bent when you're kind of like hiring with this idea of the culture and who you're trying to help along in their careers? I mean, or is like, at the end of the day, I really need some experience, or any bent in a certain direction there?
I would say I've learned that you cannot teach character. There's a lot of things I can teach. I can teach someone about renewables. I can, teach someone how to do things a certain way. But I really learned that you can't teach character. And the thing that's hard a lot of times is if something is off in your organization, it's easy for it to kind of take on a life of its own and really affect you before you even really know how damaging it's been.
Right.
And we actually went through that ourselves. We had gone through the process, and I want to say 2019 of redoing all of our values. And we went through an EOS process and really looked really hard at our company and the kind of culture that we wanted to have. So we were so happy. We spent all this time curating these values and, getting it out to the company. Here's who we are. Here's who we want to be. And then shortly after that, I got notification of this like devastating issue in the company, and it really was an eye opener for me. Because I thought, on the one level, I felt like this is who we wanted to be, and you lay out values and you figure everybody is on board, but it's not necessarily the case in real time. And it was a real eye opener for me to realize that we had to really take a hard look at everything. And, it's one thing to create all these great values, but all of a sudden when you have to make hard decisions, you have to really say, okay, do these values really mean something?
So maybe if you could expand upon that a little bit. So you created the values, right? Put all this energy in. We got these words, made a plaque, did all this stuff that
exactly.
we do, right? And then essentially someone was calling you on your values in some fashion, saying, I wasn't treated this way, and thus lawsuit or whatever maybe the outcome was here. But was that where the tension was? I mean, what was kind of the big rub?
I think what we found is that there were issues going on behind the scenes, and as much as we thought, and I think that was the thing that was hard for me, is I thought I was having these frank conversations, but I realized that there were other agendas with this individual, and they had been able to kind of create a lot of chaos and mistrust. And so as we were trying to, employ things in the company, and it was working against us. And so having to really confront that, and what do you do? And we ended up having to terminate 2 people, because it was the only way to resolve it. But I think I shared in a talk that I did that, I got this 13-page letter of all these
13
issues.
pages. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of issues.
I know.
Hopefully it was big font.
Right, exactly. But I think it was a real eye-opener, and it really, forced me to take another really hard look and make changes. But I think as a leadership team, we were able to really come together and really get behind that. I think it made our company a lot stronger because we got that clarity. We sat down and we said, okay, we've really got to take a look at this. And the challenge is that the person where we had the issues was a great performer.
That happens sometimes.
Right? So from a technical standpoint, awesome, so you're kind of looking at the bottom line, the economics, and you're saying, oh gosh, from this standpoint, wow, this person really impacts the bottom line in a positive way. And yet from the business standpoint, from the standpoint of our EQ, our soft skills, business acumen, all of that, it was devastating. So we had to make a really hard choice around and really choose what's going to be first, the bottom line or the culture of the company and the people.
Well, that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
Right.
And that's not an uncommon problem. The high performer leaves a big wake, and the performance. It's there's a great book, and I'll actually put a link in the podcast thing written by this guy Jim Lair, and he doesn't use the word values; he uses principles. He says there's two versions. There's the what do they say? The performance principles. So things like focus and courage and discipline, get things done kind of thing. So the high performer, but then there's the moral principles, which is the EQ piece, which, honesty, integrity, all these other kinds of good things. And if you have one without the other, it's a bad equation. But it's a great book. And one of the things he also described was that all values will fail under enough stress. And that's why you have to really own them and keep reinforcing them, because the stress will come, just like what you ran into.
Right. And I think people are looking at you, right? It's because, of course, it's one thing to create these values. And I really felt like in a lot of cases, as I was watching other companies that were having issues, and right around this time, there was a lot of things that came out about companies up in Silicon Valley where really the problems start at the highest level. I thought to myself, Kim, this is really where it matters. What do you really stand for?
And everyone's watching.
Everyone is watching because they really want to know, are you going to back it up? Are you going to really be who you say you are? And it sounds easy to talk about it, but it's really hard.
I think one of the funny things in those scenarios is that, and I will say this, almost every time I've been around someone getting fired or watching someone get fired, when it finally happens, the person went through all this stress about making the decision, then everyone comes up and says, finally, because often that person's the last one to actually find out what was going on. And the whole organization was dealing with this havoc for way too long. And it's always like, oh, I don't feel so bad now.
Exactly. It really validates. And I think that's why it's a lesson for us in our role as leaders to really be aware. And I think we have to work at it. It's not something that is always real evident. And I know sometimes just even having conversations with people, they say, well, Kim, you're the president or whatever. And so your conversation might be different than even other people's conversations. So engaging the right people. I think also as a leader, it's important to have people that have that great business acumen. Sometimes I'm the right person to make the call. Sometimes I'm not. But if I reach out to somebody who's trusted, and, one way or the other, we need to have those conversations. And I think we're going to be held accountable even more coming out of COVID, because I think part of all this great resignation, people are not resigning really from companies. They're resigning from their supervisors or their managers or people that they feel aren't really listening and aren't really paying attention. And we're not going to be able to get away with that anymore.
I think it's the positive of COVID. I mean, this should have happened a long time ago. I think this is what's kind of bringing this whole idea of, like conscious capitalism, these other movements to life. Is like, oh, geez, we have people here. They're humans. They have heart. They care, right? So, yeah, bringing humanity to business is a really important thing. I was kind of circle back. You were speaking about character. How do you know if you're doing a new hire, I mean, how do you sort through that? Because, you're talking like, hey, are you honest? Oh, yeah, of course I'm honest, right? I mean, how do you figure that out?
Gosh, it's such a great question, right? I think we've really tried to ask really good, really interesting questions of people. I go a lot off intuition, but certainly I've made some missteps. It's been a challenge in this environment, but I really look for how people show up and their sincerity. It's kind of interesting for me because right now so much is virtual, and I will even go off of, will somebody show up on video with me? Because I've had some people that
they won't show their face,
right? That and that's video is really a media rich tool for us to be able to assess someone and their sincerity. So that to me is really important. It's interesting.
Speak to that.
Right. I mean,
give us the tips, Kimberlee.
Well, yeah, right.
How are you using the tool? How do you decipher it?
Well, when you're looking at someone and how they're presenting themselves, how they're answering questions, I think that openness. I started asking a question in interviews. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake, and what happened and how you fixed it. And it's interesting the responses that I've gotten to that. I've had people really tell me some really, bearing some really difficult situations where they made a mistake. There was really a lot of implications to it, but how they dealt with it. And that tells me a lot about their character, what they're willing to reveal, how, how
mistake? I never made a mistake.
Right. And, how vulnerable are they willing to be? Because I think there's a certain amount of vulnerability in business. It's something that I think a lot of that we used to separate from business and say it doesn't really belong in business, but I think it does now. And so I'm looking for that authenticity. I'm looking for that vulnerability. I'm looking for that person who's willing to share I asked one person, and, it was interesting, and they just kind of said, well, the attorney gave me the wrong information, so I really, and it was like,
wasn't
okay.
even me, it was the other guy.
Yeah, and so I thought, okay, not a good fit.
Well, there's a tip for the folks out there. Ask people when things didn't go so well and see what they got to say. See who they blame, right?
See who they blame.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
If they're willing to take some of the blame.
Any ownership in this at all? Nah, it wasn't me, but I just happened to be a bystander. Well, that's good stuff. That's really good stuff. I want to kind of circle back to so when all of a sudden your values kind of came under a bit of an assault, let's say, did that lead to changing the values at all? I mean, did you step back and say, well, let me reassess one or two of these, or maybe just how we apply them? I mean, was there so that happened. So did it have an impact on kind of how the values are being addressed in the business?
Well, I think one of the things we did in response was to make sure that we were having conversations with people, picking up the phone and taking the time away from the day to have conversations. Even for me, taking the time to touch base with people and just putting that time on my calendar to give people the opportunity to share with me where they at. And it's kind of intuitive, or we should know better, but just asking questions and letting people really have a chance, how can I help you? What do you need? Do you have the tools that you need? So those conversations and ongoing, I think are super important, and we forget about that. Also a touch of real, we have a lot of kids in our business, and we're on virtual calls, and people are on video, and every once in a while there's a little face that pops up. And I kind of love that. I feel like it's a real great piece about our business and just things being real.
We are humans here. You say that reminds me, my very first job, I was a manufacturing engineer working for Honeywell, so a big manufacturing facility. And I remember the machine operators were still talking about a plant manager who were like two prior to me coming there, right? So years ago, it was working there. And what they always talked about was every morning he walked the floor. Just walked the floor, had a presence, had a relationship, right? So when I had that job, I walked the floor because That's how you find out things. And yeah, good advice. And we're so busy, we tend not to do that, right?
I know. It's one of the first things that we lose.
What's that TV show with the boss guy where he pretends to be an employee or whatever? It's always this like major surprise. I didn't know what it was like to be an employee in this company.
Is that The Office, maybe? I don't know.
It's like they always end up crying. I forget the name of it, but it's an opportunity where the boss goes and sees what looks like and feels like to work in his own company or her own company.
Right.
And it's always this big eye-opening thing. It's like, really? You just never bothered to get out of your office once to go down there and see what's happening? So, and interesting stuff. I'd also like to touch upon, I know you're doing a lot in the area of mentoring women and women leaders. Share a little bit about that. What does that look like, and where's the big need, and what should other leaders be thinking about in that space?
Well, I just gave a negotiations workshop to a group on Friday. And so a lot of my takeaway from that is women are looking for ways to have conversations. They are looking for guidance. They're looking to understand how they can succeed and what they need to do, and also how they can be heard. And I spend a lot of time helping women understand that, as much as we have advocates, we have to be our own advocate. We have to be prepared to talk about, who we are. It's great to work hard, but you can't just assume that because you work hard, it's going to be the automatic, succession plan. You've got to really be purposeful about that, and I think it's something that women really need to pay attention to. When I'd spend a lot of time talking to women that do want to succeed in renewables or whatever, and I just hear a lot of frustration. I hear a lot of frustration with leadership. Not understanding what the succession plan is, not knowing what steps they need to take, not really having the guidance, the mentors.
It's probably true for men as well as the women.
I think it can be true for men as well, right?
Yeah.
So I feel in leadership, it's really important. It has to be reciprocal. This is one thing that's really resonating with me, is we cannot put the burden entirely on the women or the men or whoever it might be. It has to be something that leadership embraces, and they realize that they need to take an active role in how they encourage people and how they show up. And a lot of the time I'll tell women, reach out, ask someone to go to coffee, and then ask questions. What podcasts are you listening to? What books are you reading? I really want to move to the next level. What skills and strengths do you think I need to develop? How should I show up at the next meeting? I really want to be a contributor. And I share a lot of real life tactics with women. There's subtle things that women do sometimes that work against themselves. So
such as?
Well,
do tell.
Oh, so one interesting thing, but there's a couple things, but one of the interesting things I share with women is, taking a seat at the table. We hear a lot about that. But, I challenge women, don't sit in the back of the room. Don't sit at the end of the table. A lot of times women walk in and, the men maybe kind of are all near the head of the table or whatever, and the women are, they're a little fearful or they're not as confident.
I heard you tell a great story at a conference you were at.
Oh,
share that story, because now you're telling other women this is what I did, and it took some nerve, right?
Well, I'm not even sure which story it is because there's so many, but there was one in particular, and maybe this is the one you're thinking about. But I was at a conference. It was actually in the Southeast. I was one of the InfoCast conferences. And everyone was going to lunch. Is this the one that
I think so, yeah.
About?
And you showed up late.
I showed up late, and so I'm walking in with my plate into this room. And if anyone's ever been to a renewable conference, it's mostly all men in, navy blue and black suits. So pretty much all the seats were taken. And there was one table that was a few women and a few men, and there was obviously open seats. But there was one table that was pretty crowded, and it was all men. And I thought to myself, okay, Kim, you can go take the seat at the safe table, or you can go just kind of barge in at the other table where it's all, all the men. And they were so gracious and obviously welcomed me. And we ended up having a great conversation, and I did all the things that I try to tell other women to do, ask questions. And so seated next to a great guy from Duke Energy, and he was telling me, we had this awesome conversation, what books he was reading, and I came home with all these notes. It was really fabulous. But even me in my stage of my career, I find myself thinking, okay, do I make the safe choice or what do I do? But this is what we need to do as women. We need to remind ourselves. And so
I'm going to say that's men too, right?
It's men too.
I would have that same conversation in my head if I walked into the room, right? There's the safe table.
Right.
Versus, there's some hitters, or there's the speaker, or whatever, right? And it's like,
exactly.
do I belong over there? Right? But that could be your game changer. It could change. It could change everything.
Well, because it does. It forces you to get outside of your comfort zone. It forces you to have a different conversation. It forces you. And I think, again, if you're smart, ask questions. Don't necessarily use it as an opportunity just to talk about yourself. Ask people, what's going on? What are you thinking about?
That's great advice. Be curious.
Be curious. Exactly.
Yeah. Don't make it about you. Right?
Exactly.
But like you said, super welcoming. Yeah, come on in. We got room. But boy, we can make up a lot of stories in our heads, can't we?
Exactly. We're our biggest barrier. Sometimes too.
That's a great tip. What else you got?
Put
the heat on you here, Kimberlee.
I know. Wow.
that was awesome.
Well, the other thing, and this is, again, it's subtle, but it's kind of funny when you think about it. But a lot of times when you see a room and, people are sitting around the table, a lot of times women are just taking up a really small space.
Mm.
They sit down at a table and they put everything right in front of them, and they're all very organized and keep their elbows in. But if you notice, a lot of times men go in and they're not afraid to take up space. And it's something that we're not even aware of, right? But if you go into the next meeting, you can look around and see, that's kind of interesting. But men are not afraid to spread out, take up space. So I encourage women, take up space. Have a presence.
Wow.
Be willing to take up the space, because it's all about, feeling small and feeling maybe little, and I don't have a lot to contribute. So you need to set yourself up to be in a position where you're able to contribute. And I challenge women too, sit across from the presenter, sit across from the decision maker, sit across from the person who's going to be, in the power seat, so to speak. Because again, a lot of times we don't do that. And I'm as guilty as others. So These are all things I've had to learn,
right, for sure.
Through my career.
But to your point, that's just body language, right? People just read that. You're not even consciously, you read that, the Miko, right?
Yeah.
Versus, here I am.
Yeah, really. Exactly.
We're about out of time. What's the big thought, big idea? What would you like people to walk away from this podcast with? Something maybe I forgot to ask the question on, or something you want to reinforce? What's the big idea?
Well, I guess a couple things. First of all, I want to really challenge leadership, for us to really step up more and more. I'm realizing as I have all these conversations that it's incumbent upon us to create a reciprocal environment where not only are we challenging our people to step up and ask for that, ask for that role, ask for that project, ask for that promotion. But we need to create an environment where people feel like they can do that. And if they're not ready, then we're going to have that conversation with them and say, here's what you need to do. I'd love to see you succeed. I want to see you do this. You're ready for this, whatever it might be. But I think that's so important now for us looking to attract and keep people. I can't always compete on the basis of cost, but I will compete on the basis of my culture and my people any day who get on the phone, interview, and say, we love our culture. It's super important to us. We're going to protect that. We want to know that you're going to be part of our culture in a really positive way. So I think it's just so important.
And that works. This is what the Great Resignation is about, is because people are saying it's not about the money. I want to go work for that company like Kimberlee's running over there, right?
That's what I want.
I want to be seen. I want to be seen. And that's about leadership. This needs to change, right? This is what the movement's all about.
Absolutely.
Well, Kimberlee, thank you so much for coming in and taking the time to be on the show today and sharing your amazing experience and insights and wisdom. And for all the work you're doing here in San Diego and really around the country, trying to help us live in a little better planet. Well, that's our show for today. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share the podcast with a friend. That's the best way to help us to continue to get the word out to help the conscious capitalism movement here in our own community of San Diego. I'm Jeff Blanton saying, in the meantime, go do what you do. Go do what you do best, for we are all counting on